morning and welcome to Citizen Extra, the Monday edition. My name is Fred Ndimuli. The debate over ongoing efforts to lower the cost of food and especially maize flour continues, with opinions divided on how the authorities have handled the entire situation. The government says it has done all it possibly could in lowering the cost of the commodity through allowing cheaper maize imports. Ugali may now be readily available on the tables of Kenyans, but still questions linger. Was this the only way to go about it? What do cheaper maize imports mean for the Kenyan farmer, for example? Could the situation have been averted? Away from the Ugali debate, major political formations of Jubilee and NASA appear beleaguered and confused on how to handle independent candidates. While the Jubilee leadership appears to prefer a soft kid-gloves approach, NASA has declared an all-out war. The independents are not making it any easier for the parties. The formation of the Kenya Alliance of Independent Candidates is seen as the apex of defiance. So what happens next? Meanwhile, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission has embarked on the process of vetting the more than 16,000 nominees for various elective races ahead of August. Is it an exercise in futility, given that even EACC itself admits that it cannot bar anyone from vying for office unless that person is convicted in a court of law and does not lodge an appeal against that conviction? KNCHR, which is also part of the team undertaking the vetting of nominees, is today seeking clarification from the Supreme Court on that matter. Amid all these happenings, the feuding between Wiper Party leader Kalonzo Musyoka and ally turned 4 persists. That is Senator Johnson Muthama. Now, these are the issues that we'll be looking at on this edition of Citizen Extra. Now, we kick off with the maize debate, and in studio we're privileged to have Kipruto Arap Kirwa, former agriculture minister, and also deputy party leader ANC, is also a candidate, or rather a nominee, for the position of Senator Trans Nzoia County, which is one of the food baskets, is considered the food basket, is running under the ANC party ticket. We also do have James Nyoro, an agricultural economist, a former advisor on food and climate change in the office of the deputy president. He's also a running mate for the post of governor. Is Ferdinand Waititu's running mate in the race for Kiambu governor. We'll be looking, they'll be helping us understand the maize issue. But now let's go back to some time last year in June, when Deputy President William Ruto commented on the possibility of Kenya importing maize. This is what he had to say.
Wale ambao wanasema ya kwamba hatuna mahindi ya kutosha ni walaghai, na ni watu ambao wanataka kutuletea mambo ya zamani ya kujaribu kutafuta njia ya kulete ama kuimport mambo ya mahindi kuje Kenya. Hatuwezi kukubali mahindi ya kutoka nje kwa sababu tuko na mahindi ya kutosha katika taifa letu la Kenya.
I'm going to instruct the Strategic Food Reserve Board to release 1 million kilos, 1 million bags to the market, so that we avoid situations where there could be imagination that there is not enough food in this country. And therefore, we believe that we are going to see the last of the price of flour going up.
Well, that was June last year. Less than a year later, Deputy President William Ruto was on Citizen, and this is what he had to say.
There is the concern where we've seen when government, intervenes in this manner, that you may have retailers say, first we want to offload the stock that we have. Are you concerned at all about that?
Well, when you are involved in a huge program like the one we will be rolling out, you will expect hitches, you will expect issues here and there. But I think we have, the ministry has had detailed, robust discussions with the millers, and I think they have agreed on every nut and bolt, and we expect it to roll out smoothly.
All right.
Ninawaambia wakulima wa miwa na wakulima wa mahindi, serikali ya Kenya itakuwa angalifu sana. Tutahakikisha ya kwamba ile sukari tunaagiza na mahindi tunaagiza haitafika kiwango ambayo itaharibu biashara ya wakulima wa mahindi ambao wanatuzalishia kilo ama mifugo 1,042,000 kila mwaka, ama wale ambao wanazalisha sukari. We are going to be careful as the government of Kenya so that we import only enough for the shortage of our products, only enough for maize and only enough for sugar, and we will make sure that it doesn't destabilize the 6 million farmers who are engaged in maize and sugarcane growing.
So in June last year, the government was not looking at the possibility of importing maize. Less than a year later, we have no choice but to import maize from Mexico, South Africa, or wherever it is coming from. Well, Kipruto Rapkirwa, you're on record as saying that this is a mega scandal and that it was hatched a year ago. What exactly did you mean by that?
Well, thank you, Fred, for this opportunity. My statement is still very clear that at the same time when the Deputy President was saying they were not going to import maize, they knew in weather forecast that there was going to be depressed harvest and there were challenges in terms of availability of the same commodity. But in November the same year, which is just a few months down the line, they allowed close to 8 million bags of maize to leave some parts of Western Kenya to Southern Sudan and through Uganda. And this depleted the amount of maize they would have been able to move from the market. National Cereals and Produce Board last year brought only 800,000 bags of maize into the granaries of Kenya. This therefore means there were a step, and earlier, 2 months earlier, there was some fertilizer 17-17-0, which is not meant for maize, but we got it in Kitale, and many of our crops at the height of top dressing, we did not have anything. And as if that was not enough, at the intake, at the National Cereals and Produce Board, they brought parameters which have not been there since inception. The parameters of saying you need moisture content of less than 12.5% for you to be able to deliver your maize 20 CBB, until farmers went on strike for them to be allowed the normal parameters of over 13.4%.
Yes.
So these are some of the issues that you say this was a scam in the making, and therefore it is up to the government to explain why they feel they need to frustrate farmers. And when they bought the maize, they bought at 2,300, and the maize that has now arrived, landed cost is 4,200. What's the difference? Almost double the price.
Yes. Yeah, Bola James Nyoro, you are a former advisor, food and climate change in the office of the Deputy President. When you see the Deputy President say one thing in June last year, less than a year later he's saying something different, what does that make you feel?
Well, let's face facts, because facts speak for themselves. June last year, the crop had just been planted in April. Within 2 months, you can't even be sure what your harvest would be. So the normal thing is to assume that you are going to have a normal harvest. So by the time the Deputy President was speaking in June of last year, the crop was only 1.5 months old, and everything looked good, and it seemed like we are going to have a good harvest. Now, let us remember also that naturally this country has been trading, and I want to use the word trading, with Uganda. If you go to Kapchorwa or Mount Elgon, there is maize either coming from Uganda to Kenya or moving from Kenya to Uganda. If you go to the Namanga border, the same thing, Taveta. So East African countries are within COMESA, and there is free trade. So when it comes to the statement that the Deputy President made in June, it was based on the spirit that the year was looking good, the rains were looking like they were okay, and Mheshimiwa here knows that the rain in Rift Valley goes all the way up to end of July, end of August. So by that time we knew that we would get a good crop. Now when we came to end of June, it was realized that the rains are actually going out faster, or the rains were not sufficient. I agree with him, there was an initial problem of fertilizer, because what we have done now is we are not applying DAP the way we used to apply across the board. We are now doing soil testing and saying put this particular fertilizer in that particular area. So what I would say is this: towards the end of the year in November, the government announced, if you can remember, the government and the ministry had announced a purchase price of 2,300. But the DP actually came in the following day and said, no, you have to buy it at 3,000. I have said time and time again, the government cannot buy 32 million bags of maize. The business of buying maize from farmers is the private sector. The government can only buy 4 million bags
in a good year, which you can put into strategic reserves, and then keep money equivalent to another 4 million for strategic reserves. So when I say the Mheshimiwa here talk about a scam, I don't feel it and I don't see it. When it came to the response, the government response, I want to be very categorical, and Mheshimiwa knows, because I worked with him when he was Minister for Agriculture, that was in Tegemeo, that 50% half of what we call farmers buy more food from the market than they sell.
Yes.
They may be farmers today and they harvest, but they buy more than they have sold. When you have such a circumstance, those people are actually not happier with a high maize price. And there has been a tendency in this country to offer extremely high prices so that you are appeasing the farmers without knowing that you are penalizing the same people. And we have been there saying the maize prices should be lower, because you don't make profit because of high maize prices. You make profit because you have economies of scale and your cost of production is low. So I don't see the scam here, the government coming in and saying half of our population is net food buyers. We are now coming in to bring in maize from outside. It is not true that the imported maize is 4,200. It is true that the maize that was coming from Ethiopia was 4,200. But the maize that is coming in through Mombasa is at 2,500.
Despite the freight cost and everything?
Yes, it is still cheaper than our local production.
Bonakirwa, you come from Trans Nzoia, which predominantly farmers there plant maize crop. Is that the understanding of the situation, that probably the pricing of maize is what has prevented them from selling their product? We do understand that some of the farmers there claim that they have nowhere to sell their maize. Is that also true?
Well, the foundation of all this is that we are thinking in compartments. We are not thinking holistically in terms of how to sustain food security. The issue is, it begins with the first day of planting. How do you sustain that program in terms of affordable credit, in terms of effective fertilizer, and also availability of the same? As I'm talking to you now, in Trans Nzoia, we are waiting for the so-called fertilizer for top dressing from NCBB. We've been waiting for the last 2 weeks. And as you know, and he knows better than many other people in Kenya, the moment you allow, when it is ready, because it's supposed to be 40 days, then we start top dressing. Every other day that goes without you top dressing, and the rain may decide to go away for another 2 weeks, we will not be able to take maximum benefit out of top dressing that is supposed to take place. Number two, the issue is, the government in the same June, and this is something I think Dr. Nyoro should know, said that there was going to be depressed harvest because in the Horn of Africa there was a problem of the rains. So they foresaw the problem with rains. They foresaw the problem in June. In November, they were giving us stringent conditions of the issue of discolor, deceased, and what we call broken maize, and it's saying for every 10 bags you deliver, 1 bag is going to be taken away because of what they call fumbi in Kiswahili. That is a parameter that has not been there. I was in that ministry for 5 years, unless it is a new parameter. Number two, in terms of moisture content, when you tell farmers we are going for 12.5, what are you telling them? Don't come. Number three, it is not true that the deputy president announced the following day. In the first place, any policy direction must be given at the right time. When you announce the price, and the deputy president announces, let's say after 2 weeks, because he has received a delegation of farmers, and the officers at the National Cereals and Produce Board are still waiting for a circular from Nairobi, that period is when we lost our maize. It may be true, there is what we call cross-border business. And for the time I was in the ministry, from Tanzania it was either between 1 million and 2 million bags, from Uganda almost the same amount. And strategically, I would have expected the government to say, we are replenishing our strategic grain reserve to the extent of 4 million, then you keep the cash in lieu of another stock. But that never happened. And that's why I'm saying it was a scam in the making.
Yes.
It is for the government to tell us what is the alternative position that they have taken to avert this particular situation.
Gentlemen, I want you to help us understand exactly what this strategic grain reserve is supposed to cushion us from, because from one planting to harvest cycle to another, even if there's drought, isn't it supposed to fill the gap? in between. But if at all we have this grain reserve, then we cannot have the kind of shortage we're talking about, because we're talking about last year's harvest vis-a-vis this year's planting, and yet we're already having a shortage in between.
No, the strategic grain reserve is being misused here, if you want, because strategic grain reserves mean it is strategic. When a country enters into a situation like we are in, if you have 4 million bags, it actually is supposed to be 8 million bags, but 4 million bags in physical and 4 million bags equivalent of money. Our consumption per month is 3 million bags. So this strategic reserves, 8, is supposed to allow us to be okay after we have ordered an import, because an import takes about 60 days to arrive. That is the essence of National Strategic Reserve. But let me tell you, the funny thing about this National Strategic Reserve that Mheshimiwa is talking about is that it is also the same food that is used to feed the drought-stricken areas. So what actually happens, NCPB, which is supposed to play a commercial role, is playing both a commercial and a social role. And this particular year, I have to say, that role has been seen, and the organ that was setting this price was the National Strategic Reserve Committee that distinguishes between commercial maize and the maize that goes out to feed the drought-stricken people. The issue here is, and I agree with Mheshimiwa here, we are compartmentalizing this issue. We are not looking at this issue holistically. We need to look at Kenya as one where the population is growing, and since 1980, and the minister will tell you, even when he was minister 2003, 2007, even when he was minister, we kept on saying that our population is growing faster than our food production is growing, and we need to do something about it. Government after government has come in and have done nothing much in terms of bridging this gap. And increasingly, Uganda is feeding us more. Tanzania is feeding us more. Now we are seeing a situation where, because of unforeseen circumstances, where Uganda is not feeding us and is feeding Sudan, and Tanzania is feeding the southern part of Africa because of the drought, we are caught up in this dilemma.
So how does Tanzania and Uganda, how are they able to feed themselves and feed neighboring countries, yet Kenya is not able to feed itself? What is the problem here, Bwana Kirwa? Because
let me go back to the strategic grain reserve.
Yes,
I was in charge of that portfolio for 5 years. And my understanding of National Cereals and Produce Board has 3 functions. One is to assist us stock the strategic grain reserve for purposes of cushioning the market in terms of the consumer, and also mopping up from the market in terms of the seller of the commodity, so that prices are within certain reach. Number 2, there is the commercial window, and if National Cereals and Produce Board was properly structured, they could buy as many bags of maize as possible, then they can trade like any other entity that is doing business in Kenya. Number 3, the famine relief component is supposed to be domiciled in the office of the president, and that is not part of the Ministry of Agriculture. But what happens?
But it is bought by NCPB.
It is bought on agency basis.
Yes.
By NCPB.
But they buy the same price as the commercial.
They buy, the issue is simple. The issue is simple. It is not about the pricing mechanism here. We are talking about the explanation, so that we don't confuse the 3 things. The famine relief is supposed to be bought on behalf of the office of the president. Through NCPB. Through National Cereals and Produce Board on agency basis. And that is the money that is the maize that is for famine relief. But when it comes to now, the strategic grain reserve is supposed to be cushioning between the consumer and the seller. And the commercial window is what has diminished in the last many years, because that commercial window has not been encouraged, because National Cereals and Produce Board has not been properly funded.
But is this a problem basically?
It's a problem of lack of thinking.
So it is a government problem.
Let me also correct Dr. here. When I was in the ministry, strategic grain reserve was 2 million bags of maize. It is during my tenure that we moved it to 4 million, and we said now 4 million, and also 4 million in cash equivalent to the stock that needs to be purchased. So I made a lot of progress. The year before I took over, we were producing 24 million bags of maize. When I left, we were producing 42, which was almost at par with the population.
Yes.
So those are many. Now, Let's go to 2015 when it is supposed that we have produced maize. Why didn't we have a stock at the end of the year? In terms of the stock for National Cereal and Produce Board. Why last year, when we knew that stock had been depleted, we never bought, we only bought 800,000 bags of maize?
You know, Mheshimiwa, I'm not giving a scorecard on you because I know you did a fantastic job. Honestly, we worked together to do the economic recovery strategy.
Yes.
You did a fantastic, so I'm not giving you a scorecard.
Yes.
All I'm saying is that fundamentally, the problems that have afflicted food security in this country has moved from one era to your era to this era.
But when
it's only so unfortunate, let me finish this. It's only so unfortunate that at this point in time, it happens to have been Uhuru and Ruto who are sitting on a situation where Southern Africa had a drought, then there is crisis in Sudan, and then they bring in food. It could have been anybody else. We are saying as a country, we've never had a Marshall Plan, we've never had a plan that makes Kenya food secure. And I want to see both Jubilee and NASA come to Kenyans and say, this is how we are proposing to be food secure. Let us not approach it.
If I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying that we do not have a plan for food security as it is. You, speaking as a former advisor for food and climate change in the office of the Deputy President, you're saying we do not have a plan.
We started off having a plan, and he knows very well when he was the Minister for Agriculture. And we developed the strategy for revitalizing agriculture.
Yes.
And we were seeing that the population, and we advised. Remember, I was also in Tegemeo Institute, and I was a policy advisor, including to him.
Yeah, you advised me.
We advised that the population was growing at 2.5%, but the production was not increasing. And you know, one government went on to promise one thing and promise one thing. This particular government, Jubilee, they came in and they talked about a 1 million acre Kuraru project. There is the fertilizer subsidy program, which he is talking about. The procurement of maize that he is talking about. It's that we have not holistically thought that food security is about credit. Farmers must get credit. They must get appropriate fertilizer. They must get extension service. There has to be coordination between the devolved government systems and the national government systems. These things have not come in place.
Yes.
That's what we are saying.
At this point, I want to bring in analyst Joy Mdivo because she's also in studio. Joy, listening to these two gentlemen, very senior gentlemen and experts in as far as agriculture is concerned. One is a former agriculture minister, the other one an agricultural economist and a former advisor, a former presidential advisor in terms of food security. They all seem to point back to the government. That yes, regime after regime, there has been no proper plan in as far as Kenya's food security is concerned. Doesn't that concern you? Because the one thing that we do elect governments for is to ensure that we do not sleep hungry.
And you know, one thing that comes across from this discussion is both of these gentlemen are eminently qualified to discuss this topic. And I'm sure between them, they know that we have in paper very excellent plans that can help take this country forward. However, the problem with Kenya has always been the implementation. Everything in Kenya seems to rise and fall on politics. Everything seems to rise and fall on interests. So it might be in the interest of the nation to do one thing, but it is not politically expedient, or the ugly head of corruption keeps rearing itself, where you have an excellent plan, but people look for ways to try and personally benefit from the same, and it sabotages the actualization of the same. For example, even when we're talking about, let's look at the issue at hand, when we talk about the importation, the issue of price. Why is this such a hot button ticket? Because people are thinking, fine, the maize has come in, but somebody somewhere is eating regarding this particular issue. I agree with Dr. Nyoro. If we look at this critically, it is a problem that can be solved forever, where we not only produce enough, we also don't lose a lot in post-harvest, because there are some places in Kenya where we harvest a lot of maize, but it's not properly secured. So you have aflatoxin, and then you have all manner of excuses that now you find what Dr. Kira is talking about. When you bring your maize, they tell you, by the way, a percentage of this we're going to count it as a loss. Not just post-harvest preservation, we also have a big problem of middlemen who actually undercut the farmers who are working on these things. So you find somebody has spent a lot of money in production, but people have been allowed to come in, offer low prices. Why? They're taking advantage of the fact that there's no infrastructure, for example, to move your maize securely from your farm to a silo or to a market. So you'd rather just take whatever the middleman gets you, as long as he comes and takes it off your farm. So if we look at it holistically, there are little gaps where we can seal. Put aside the political expediency. Let's deal with this as a bread and butter issue, because if we do not feed our people, then there is nobody we are leading. Like we said last week, look at Venezuela. The government was brought to its knees because people were hungry. People got to a place, they didn't care that they elected you. They didn't care that you are the most popular one. The fact that they cannot feed their children was enough for them to actually bring down the government.
Yes.
So we need to solve this once and for all, and it is possible to be done.
Yes, Bonakiro, going back to your claims that this is a mega scandal, it was hatched 1 year ago, do you link it to the elections in any way?
Well, I don't want to entirely link it to the election, but I think at best it is a careless handling of issues of state. And it is at best, because how would you explain the lapses in terms of receiving of the maize and in terms of the reality that is happening today? But there is an issue that you had raised earlier about why is it cheaper in Uganda and Tanzania. It is the question of the cost of production. In Uganda, for example, they do not use a lot of fertilizer, and largely they are able to make their break even without necessarily getting involved in a lot of costs. I want to agree also with Dr. Nyoro that where the rain started beating us, there is disconnect between what is happening at the Ministry of Agriculture at the national level and also at the county level. And for a very strange reason, even the issue of agribusiness, which is supposed to be a devolved function, has not effectively been devolved from the center. These are some of the lapses that we need to engage in. The third issue, when I left the ministry, we had a policy plan in terms of ensuring national Cereals and Produce Board is properly restructured. I'm made to understand from my friend here and other sources that also the ministry is thinking holistically on how to deal with issue of food security. And if they are going to do that, they must dovetail the events at the policy level all the way to the grassroots and ensure we do what we call zoning of the country. In Kenya, we are obsessed with production of maize all over. There are some areas you can produce only 3 bags of maize per acre, and there are some areas of optimal production. We need to think of what can we produce in Makueni, what can we produce in Marakwet, what can we produce in Kiambu, what can we produce in Tanzania. So that at the end of the day, we optimize the resources of farmers and we don't waste our people's time.
Yes.
Otherwise, I'm not blaming it on anybody. I'm saying the government could have been more careful.
But now, in terms of planning, and Bonanyoro, we do understand from media records that you left the office of the Deputy President because you felt that some of your advice was not being taken into consideration. Was this part of it, that probably the way the administration is handling some of these issues to do with food security did not go in tandem with your understanding of the same problem?
No, I would want to correct that impression on air, because even as we talk now, I'm still advising government
on the same issues?
On issues to do with food security, but not as a full-time public servant. I never was public servant, and I, at a certain point, talked to both the president and the deputy president, and I said I needed to do more for Africa, just like we were trying with Amina Mohammed, a good foreign affairs minister for Kenya, but feeling that she could serve Africa better than serve Kenya. And that's what Kenya should be able to do. We can do better for ourselves and do better for the rest of Africa. So that impression created, I think, is wrong. But I want to say one thing. I do agree entirely that we need to have a Marshall Plan for this country. I want to correct maybe the impression that we may be able to create here, in particular from Mheshimiwa. I think there is no government that is elected not to be re-elected next time. And there is no government that is elected not to be re-elected next time. Every government is elected to be re-elected next time. And you do everything that you can to be re-elected. So nobody can plan to do a mega miscado on a year when you are looking for the election, unless honestly you don't want to be elected. But I want to say this. let me talk about planning and where I think we need.
For example, now that you said that, do you think this has a potential of actually affecting Uhuru Kenyatta's re-election?
No, that is why I'm saying we are trying to politicize a very sensitive issue on food security, which we shouldn't, because that's why I'm saying if really Uhuru and Ruto are seeking for re-election, unless they are not, one would not create a mega struggle for that.
Dr. Wero, it is solely, it lies squarely on the feet of those two gentlemen who lead this country to ensure that this country is food secure. Surely, where else should we look?
No, I agree with you, but like I said, and Mheshimiwa has agreed here. Food insecurity in this country started from end of 70s. That is when we started to see the difference between production and consumption. And this has been increasing government after government. But let me come to what I think we should be able to do. And I'm giving this for free to either NASA and Jubilee. We have a constitution that was promulgated in 2010. We devolved agriculture. Agriculture is one of the sectors that is 100% devolved. But when we devolved it, we allowed counties to go and do their own individual things. So Tanzania is thinking they will do maize, mangoes and oranges. Others are thinking about potatoes, sweet potatoes and coffee. Now we don't have an umbrella document that is called Kenya National Master Plan that says this is a country called Kenya. It has a population of 43 million people. Their food consumption on maize by year 2030, when the population will be 63, will be 100 million bags. This 100 million bags will be produced in 15 counties. That has a comparative advantage, and you identify those counties. Then you go on and say, how are we as national government going to work with the county government to ensure that we produce the 100 million bags that will feed Kenyans by year 2030? That is what any government, whether it's NASA or Jubilee, should do. We do the same for coffee. We do the same for tea. That is what we require. Because right now what is happening, the counties are not coordinated at all. Each one of them is doing their own things. And then how do you add apples and oranges to resort to a national master plan? That is what we require to do. And then let us stop this accusation right, left, center, because the country, let me tell you, the problem we have entered into with depletion of NCPB stores, because we don't have, I think we have less than 1 million in NCPB stores, with importation that we are going to bring in, with rains that have failed, as you can see, with armyworm, okay, all of that will result to, at the end of the year, we are going to have less than 30 million bags. Our consumption is 43. If you put animal feeds, it's 45. We have entered into a big sink, and it will take us 2 years to recover. It will take us 2 years to recover.
So we're looking at more importation of maize because we have no choice. We have nothing, and 1 million bags cannot sustain this country. Even for, you said 3 million bags a month?
Yes.
So 1 million bags should be a week.
Well, that's why we have imported. We have imported 5 million bags. And we will be getting some harvest from South Rift in June, July. We will also get some harvest. But what we are saying, if you look at the balance sheet of how much we are going to harvest the whole of this year, and look at the consumption the whole of the year, we are into a deeper problem than we have started. So we need to think pragmatically.
We will need to continue importing continuously for probably the rest of the year.
Yes, but we have to be careful when we import, not to depress the domestic prices. And this is where pragmatic planning should come in.
Okay, Bwana Kirwa, is that, do you see the same way as Bwana Nyoro, or you have a different opinion?
Well, I see the same way, but I don't know why he gets this blame game, unless it's in another studio, because I've been, I've been trying to state the facts as they are. The Deputy President the other day said they had record harvest of 42 million bags in 2015. Naturally, they should have been able to arrest some of that maize and keep it in National Cereals and Produce Board. They should have been carryover, because carryover is not only in the farmer stores. They should be also carryover from the stores of the nation, that is National Cereals and Produce Board. There was no carryover from 2015 that was insufficient amounts. And in 2016, having known that there was going to be a gloom, they decided only to buy less than 1 million bags. That is not blame game. I'm stating the facts as they are. Today, as we are talking, they have only 960,000 bags within the National Cereals and Produce Board. That is dangerous. And you see, food security in Kenya is national security, especially when it's involving maize, because maize is the crop #1, and we should always have that in mind. So these are some of the facts that we need to present, and I'm not saying it is because of the Jubilee. I'm saying somebody somewhere was careless. He never handled the situation well. They were doing more of talking and comparing figures of Kibaki regime and their own regime, but now the rain has started beating them. Well, as whether they are going for re-election, that is entirely up to the people of Kenya. Whether they will be re-elected or not re-elected, that is not important for me. I'm worried about food situation in Kenya.
But surely the ability or inability of any Kenyan to put food on the table should be the basis of which leader to elect. Joy, don't you think?
Exactly. And what Honorable Kiro has said, I think, sums it up. Food security is actually equal to national security. And if we get to a place where the government can realize that governments exist in perpetuity, it's just the players who change. Then if you put a master plan that Dr. Nyoro is talking about, if you put a master plan in place, it doesn't matter which regime put it in or which regime carried it out. All that matters is that we have a place where we can have an even keel. It is unfortunate in this day and age that we're still talking about food security, and we've had there's a lot of research that has gone into this, a lot of investment has gone into this. Kenyans are willing to work hard at this. It's one of those places where if the government is serious about this, I'm not saying politics interferes. If the government thought about it in terms of this is not legacy, this is not a feather in our cap, this is actually bread and butter issues, then you take it as seriously as we take national security. Even if you look at how the budget is allocated, what we give to our defense forces, which by the way do an excellent job and is a very important docket, compared with what we give to agriculture. Agriculture plays not the second fiddle, it's not even in the orchestra. And this tells you the seriousness with which we ought to be taking this matter. And moving forward, what I would like to see is a statesman's approach to this question. There's the conference that's coming up this week talking about, not just in Kenya, but in Africa, how do we solve this problem? Do we need to diversify our food sources? Do we need to diversify even how we do this? Land consolidation, how are we using our land? Is arable land in Kiambu being used to put up apartments rather than planting food? And yet arid and semi-arid areas can be reclaimed. Look at what's happening in Yatta, in Pokot. Simple Silanga, doing some little irrigation, has changed places where we thought could not produce anything into very arable land. There is need for that master plan, and not for government to think of it in terms of just while we're in power, but in perpetuity, so that this can be carried on and replicated and deal with this issue once and for all.
Okay. As we wrap up this conversation, gentlemen, I need to ask you, do you think the main problem is that we've left this planning to politicians? That probably experts like Bwana James Nyoro, who's also going into politics, would have done much better, an agricultural economist, advisor to the president. But you know all these things, but we're leaving it to either Jubilee or NASA. What are the experts doing? Do you think politicians can actually help us resolve these problems?
I think for me, if you ask me, the problem basically is that we have over-politicized almost everything, and particularly in agriculture. There is a book that was written by somebody called Bates, and it's called the Miracles of Market Economy, and it talks about the politicization of agriculture in Kenya. There is too much politics within our agriculture in Kenya. And a good example is what Mheshimiwa is talking about, fertilizer subsidy. If you look at fertilizer subsidy today, it is not a sustainable mechanism for food production, because it is being driven by government, and government has no business in doing business. The business people have business in doing business. So we have over-politicized agriculture. Yes, we do not put our hardware in the mouthways, because we have underinvested in agriculture, and we are polarized. It is either us or them. And my appeal is this: we did that during Kibaki's time, and Mheshimiwa will remember, it was so much about them and us until we came up with Vision 2030. And we said, any successive government coming in must implement Vision 2030. It's not a question of you coming in with your own vision, small vision, every time you come in. And that is what we need to do as a country. Just as we are thinking about probably that we are going to review this constitution after so many years, I think we as a country need to do a convention, bringing in the protagonist and say never again shall Kenya be importing food through any sea or even through any port. We should be able to export. That is what we require. We under-politicize the situation that is currently in there today.
Yes, Banakirwa, do you think that leaving it to politicians will just leave us in this problem? It will just become a cyclic issue that, yes, next year, next government, same problem?
Well, I think there is this misnomer that politicians are not professionals. It is not entirely true. That's why he's going to politics, and that's why I was in politics earlier than him. We went to the same school. He happened to have gone up to PhD. Then I went to my PhD in terms of political equation. So, but the most important thing, Dr. Nyoro, is that let us think together as a nation.
Yes.
As the people of Kenya, how can we sustainably keep our farmers on the job, at the same time ensure that there is cheaper, affordable food to those who are not farmers. It is a very important phenomenon. And even in Europe, for your information, I know you know better than I do, but you choose not to say it. In Europe, in Kenya, we live under, almost 50% of our population lives under $1 a day. In Europe, they are subsidizing a day €2.5 per cow, because they are sure food security is such an important component of a national economy. The second thing that is very important is that let us not overborrow. We have now crossed the 4 trillion mark of borrowing. Kibaki left us at 800 billion. Now we are at 4.4 trillion mark. And if we go, by the end of the year, we are likely to be 4.3 trillion that we have borrowed. Our economy cannot sustain that. It is like me borrowing and buying 20 lorries when I have only 1,000 bags to carry.
That's a topic for another day.
Gentlemen, before I leave you, I'll give you a final opportunity to comment on the political issues, especially where you are, Dr. Nyoro, especially in Kiambu, the race in Kiambu, and for Bwana Kiputo Rapkirwa, probably NASA and Trans Nzoia. In Kiambu, and this is a question I hear politicians being asked, how is the ground? How is the ground in Kiambu? Given now that the independent candidates are so many, the incumbent governor has come back, is probably the leader of this Kenya Alliance of Independent Candidates. How does that affect the race? This is your final comment, just briefly.
You know, Kiambu is in peace, I can tell you that. First, as you probably saw, Wanjiko is such a serious person, that more serious than we thought. They are looking at what you are able to deliver and how, not just what you deliver, how you deliver it. Are you delivering it with me? You know, we saw devolution. Devolution was about participatory leadership. Devolution was about let us work together. People of Kiambu have spoken through the primaries, and I can tell you they are going to continue speaking because they want professionals. You've seen situations where simple people like mechanics and cooks have been elected. So whatever you are calling that association of independent is not worrying us. Our problem right now is somebody coming in and say, I ran away from your party because you did not conduct free and fair elections, and your party is not free and fair, but I'll go on the other side and campaign for you. That is ironical. If you don't like my party, why are you campaigning for me? Independent candidates, we are saying we have no problem with you. Let us go out to Anjiko, let us appeal so that we have good voter turnout for the president, because we know obviously that Uhuru and Ruto are going to come back. But for Kiambu, do not worry about people who have been defeated, who have re-entered. Those are always sideshows.
Okay, Barakira, because this is a topic we'll be discussing in the next hour with a different team of panelists. We've seen Raila Odinga coming out and actually saying that anyone who's gone as an independent should not be voted in any ODM stronghold. Do you think that's the way to go? We've seen Jubilee trying to say, okay, fine, anyone who's independent, apart from the aspirants and the nominees like Bwana Nyoro, the party leadership is saying anyone who supports Bwana Uhuru Kenyatta is welcome. Yet, on the other side, we're seeing an all-out war against independence. Do you think that's the way to go?
Well, let me say this. Overborrowing that Dr. Nyoro doesn't want me to talk about.
For the next...
Yeah, but that is the cost of inflation. We are talking about maize, about fish. How about other commodities? They have gone through the roof because of inflation that is occasioned by overborrowing. Now, number two, when it comes to issues of independent candidates, political parties in Kenya are in a nascent stage They are not yet democratic. They are still crawling babies. They are not yet walking. And we need to look at it holistically. We need a study on the issue of political party nominations. They were shambolic across the board. Kiambu might have been better, but many
best.
Well, the first day you cancelled, Dr. Nyoro, you cancelled the first day. But of course, finally, I just want to say, independent candidates have a position in the political realm of Kenya. Remember today, 68 members of parliament went to parliament in parties other than their own. This means, effectively, we may get 40 members of parliament who will come in independent.
So you do not necessarily agree with the
wish them away. And remember, this election is going to be won on the basis of 50% plus 1. That one vote may be that one of an independent candidate that you need.
So you disagree with your party leader or your...
I'm an individual. When I come here, I don't come as NASA. I come as Kirwa. But also, you know, you see, Fred.
Yes.
You know, you are being very kind to Jubilee. At the beginning, they were told, if you are not in Jubilee, no business. That was said by Deputy President. That was said by the President himself. Later on, it was said by Duale. If 3 members of Jubilee say the same, how do you take the position that when the President realized this is a serious threat to his re-election, he had to make peace with them?
Okay.
But finally, let me tell Dr. Nyoro, I've won elections, I've lost elections. Losing an election comes at the time you least expect.
Okay.
Don't celebrate.
I've lost once.
I've lost one, but you are not won. You lost what you did not have.
Now I have won.
You have won. Let's end it there. Thank you so much.
That should be paid by weed.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kipruto Arap-Kirwa, former Agriculture Minister, also a nominee, an ANC nominee for the post of Senate, Trans Nzoia County. James Nyoro, agricultural economist, former advisor, Food and Climate Change Office of the Deputy President, also a running mate in the race for Kiambu Governor. On a Jubilee Party ticket. We also need to thank Joy Mdivo, our analyst, for that particular discussion. Let's take a break. In the next hour, we'll be discussing this issue of independent candidates and how Jubilee and NASA are handling that debate.